Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special call board meeting of the Hoover Board of Education. And ask everyone to please rise for our invocation and pledge. Will you pray? Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the cool temperatures in the early morning, letting us know that the change in the seasons is on the way. Father, we would like to come tonight asking you to bless our school system. Father, we're thankful for each one of our teachers and employees and administrators that make up our system. Father, we're thankful to be able to work with our city, and we just ask that you bless them as well. Father, continue to bless each one of us. Keep us safe from harm. Thank you for our leaders. Thank you for our police and fire for protection. Father, we ask this prayer in your name. Amen.
Amen. You join me in honoring our country and our flag and our pledge of allegiance. Salute. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to begin our meeting tonight with special thanks to our mayor and the city council and city manager, Mr. Payne, Ms. Margie Henley, our city clerk, for allowing us to use their chambers tonight. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to travel from here to the central office in 30 minutes to be able to do our meeting, so we're thankful that they allowed us to use these facilities tonight. Ms. Linda, when you get back, will you please execute a roll call so we can make sure we have established a quorum, please?
Mr. Stephen Presley.
Here.
Mr. Earl Hoover.
Here.
Mr. Craig Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Jill Gaines-Beach. Here. Deanna Bowman. Comments. Here.
Thank you. All five are here. Board members, you have in front of you the agenda for tonight's meeting. Can I get a motion to accept this agenda?
So moved.
Have a second? Second. Any questions from the board? If not, all in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is accepted. Dr. Murphy, would you like to introduce our budget presentation, and then Ms. Hancock?
Yes, Mr. Presley, thank you so much. I would like to just take a minute to acknowledge the diligent work and effort that has gone into tonight's presentation by Tina Hancock, our CSFO. She has, as you know, just joined us as of June the 13th, and wow, what a huge task has been in front of her. Moving from a smaller school district to a much larger school district, and the time and effort and energy that she's invested is just superb. So, Ms. Hancock, thank you so much for your work and your preparation for this evening. And so if you would please share with us our proposed 2017 annual budget.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for sharing your time and for the interest that you have shown for Hoover City Schools. In the budget package that the public has received, there is a form at the very back of that is the response to a review of the proposed annual budget. You are welcome to make comments or ask questions on this form. Please include your name, your address, telephone number, and email, and we will address those questions as you get those in. This is just something that you don't necessarily have to use, but it is something that the state provides as part of the budget package. With that, let me explain what the board has in front of them tonight. They have just a copy of the presentation. Then they have the proposed annual budget, which you all have if you picked one up. And then they also have a copy of the draft of salary schedules. And that they will choose to approve as part of the budget package. The budget process actually takes place in the spring, working with school and department staff meetings. Each principal meets with a team of district administrators, and they collaborate to determine the staffing for the upcoming school year. This is usually done at that time as foundation units from the state are provided. Staffing is generally completed by mid-April, and approximately 82% of this budget in front of you is determined at this time. So 82% of our budget is just people and benefits, staffing and benefits. Principals and department heads submit a budget for non-payroll expenditures for their respective areas of responsibility, basically their schools. They submit that, and that is also included as part of this budget package. Budgets for federal programs are completing during the summer months, just as as that funding information becomes available, it kind of trickles in throughout the summer, so we work on those throughout the summer. The budgeting process is designed to develop for the school system a tool. It's just a planning tool as we move forward for the use of the financial resources that will best serve Hoover City Schools and the needs of our current student body. And with that, I want to just acknowledge that, as I mentioned, the salary schedule is part of this budget package that the board has as a draft at this point. This salary schedule and this budget does include the 2% and 4% raises that the state legislature provided. One unintended consequence that we have found with that is those employees that borderline the $75,000 threshold, if they were just under that, say at $74,000, and they received the 4% raise, those that were just behind them, say up 76, that received the 2%, those that received the 4% just under the 74 actually would jump over those. So it became an unintended consequence. At this point, it impacts 17 employees in our system, and to the extent of $36,000, which is something that we have acknowledged, and that is an unintended consequence of that 2%, 4% raise that the legislature provided. This is just some general information about the projected enrollment of the different schools in our system. The projected enrollment totals 13,916. As far as counting just administrators and teachers, we total 1,104.5 administrators. Our local units are at 201.27. I know this is a little probably difficult to see, but I just wanted to kind of speak to this and kind of, I guess the former teacher in me came out a little bit when Dr. Murphy and I were discussing this. This is called the B1 report, that what we refer to. This is what is submitted to the state as our budget report. It's just an overall, encompasses everything that's in the budget, and it's laid out in a different format. I wanted to speak to this because our financials also look to this as well, or look in the same format. It is laid out in different columns. You see the general fund budget, or what is called the general fund. That's the first column. This is the only column that is not considered restricted funds, meaning this is the one that when they talk about what's your 1 month reserve, when the state talks about that, this is the column that they're looking at as the general fund. This is the one that we get to decide as a board what we're going to do with that money, and of course, as we saw, most of it is staffing. The other, the special revenue, debt service, capital projects, and expendable trust are all restricted funds. Basically, we don't get to just decide whatever we want to do with those. The special revenue includes those federal programs that are restricted. Debt service is basically just exactly what it is. It's our debt. Capital projects are, just as it says, specifically for capital outlay. Expendable trust, those are the funds that sit at the local school that are the booster clubs or PTO funds, and it's called trust because we act as the trust agency for those funds, but they are on our books and therefore disclosed in this report. So the breakdown of that actual budget, I just kind of did another slide to break it down. Our revenues total $167 million. Our expenditures $169 million. Other fund sources or uses total $335,000. Excess of revenues and sources over or under expenditures with a deficit of 1.8. I think we're proud of this. We are very proud of this. This is a reduction of a $9 to $10 million deficit that we've seen in the past. With that being said, this is a very conservative budget. It is tight, and we will need to live within our means. Revenues were budgeted basically flat, looking at no increases just as to what we received this year. Hopeful that that will be a little more. We'll see an increase as new homes and more ad valorem tax, but it was basically flat. Expenditures, again, are tight. There is no, as we say, we've said fluff in this budget, but I still feel that we can live within it. We worked with the department heads, met with those. Everyone was comfortable with their budget and cutting their expenses, and I feel good about that. Let me just break down on that V1 report that I just saw that's in your budget package, what it talks about when it talks about the fund balance. The fund balance includes the projected fund balance from this budget against the 2016 final amended budget, what was projected in that budget that we would end at. We won't know exactly where we end until we close the year come, October, end of October. But when you look at that, in the general fund, we increased by about $4.5 million. Special revenue, about $1 million. Debt service, $621, which actually, let me explain that real quick. Our debt service revenues actually are pledged from those local taxes that are in the general fund. So even though you don't always see revenue, and if you go back to that previous slide, you see revenues in debt service of just $2 million. That's what was outright pledged and promised, and so it has to be recorded there. But what was really pledged is the ad valorem taxes and sales taxes, so that's actually recorded in the general fund. That's just a accounting thing that the state says to do, so that's how we did it. Capital projects, 6.2. We do get to carry a fund balance in capital projects. Let me just clarify that. You are allowed to do that in case you see some upcoming large projects that you want to do and you want to carry some over. There's been some carryover in years past and a little bit this year, but we've got some, as we'll get to, some capital projects that we're looking at. Expendable trust, again, that's not our money, that's the PTO and Booster Club money, but they're projecting a little bit of, about a $500,000 increase. So total, you see that negative there. We started with a projected ending balance of October 1, again, projected balance as of the amended budget of 2016 of 92, and this proposed budget with a deficit of 1.8 at 91. And total budgeted revenues, this just kind of lays it out by the different funds. General fund, $142 million. Special revenue, $16 million. Debt service, 2. Capital projects, 4.7. Fiduciary trust, 2.5, for a total of $167 million. And I just broke it down like this because this is how it's broken down on that report, and kind of just explain a little bit how that looks. And this is where it looks by percentage. As we know, 84.7%, the largest percentage is our general fund. And then the rest of them are quite small, as you can see from the previous report. And another way to break that down is how we receive that funding: state, federal, local, other, and that still totals the same amount. It's just broken down with where we receive the different funding.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes, sir.
Can you ask a question?
Sure.
From what I understand, we're very fortunate in the district we're in right now because you can see that our local funds, when
Yes.
include county and city, exceed what the state
Absolutely.
does. There are many districts in the state that only receive state funding. Which
Right.
again follows through with that one renewals we've got coming up on the general ballot, just to show how fortunate we are in this community to get the contribution we do from our stakeholders.
Absolutely, and that funds our local units, as we just said. And as I've told this board before, and if any of you saw or were at the interview when I interviewed, I come from a very poor county that all we lived by was what the state gave.
So could you imagine if all you had was the state funds, what this community would look like? So sometimes we forget to remember the contribution from all the taxpayers in here.
And here's just laid out into a pie chart again of just the different percentages. As we already saw, local is our biggest percentage of revenues. This basically is set up on revenue per pupil versus enrollment. The projected enrollment, as we said, was 13,916 students. What we're spending based upon our budgeted revenues is 12. The gap was a little larger last year. Again, as we'll see in the next couple of slides, we received more funding through foundation and a couple of other state funds and some federal funds, so that gap closed a little bit. So that means what this shows is that we're spending more on students than we did last year. This is basically comes straight from the State Department. It's the LEA allocation based upon the system average daily membership, or what we consider average daily attendance. We had a change of negative 46.75. This is broken down by how many units the foundation provides for teachers, principals, assistant principals, counselors, librarians, and a career tech coach. As you will see, we had a change or an increase of 5 teachers. Now, that does not mean that we hired 5 extra teachers. What that means is we were able to put 5 teachers that were locally paid into the foundation budget and relieve that local budget a little bit. This changed because of the divisors in the middle school grades. The legislature adjusted those divisors, and you probably heard talk about that. This again came straight from the State Department. This is our, and I know it may be a little bit hard to read, I'm sorry, from the LEA allocation sheet. It's the difference in what we received 2017 and what we received in 2016. That second column is basically what the units per unit was in 2016. So our student materials went up a few dollars, $405 from the $374 that we received last year. The technology, they actually increased by $100 this year per unit. Library stayed at 21.26. Professional development stayed at 63.79. Textbooks went up, a couple of dollars from 52 to 54, leaving us with a total change overall in the foundation budget of $3,261,000. So as I said, they funded 5 more teachers, and you saw that gap closed with, per student revenue that we budgeted. So that's part of the change, is that extra $3 million that we received from foundation. And just some other highlights of state funding that we received, and this also shows the change. School nurses went up $16,000, technology coordinator $1,000, and let me just point out, you can see that $35,000 doesn't even pay a beginning teacher, therefore it would not cover our technology coordinator's salary. They basically just give you enough to chew on. Transportation operations went up about $324,000. Fleet renewal is down. We talked about this. We're not sure what that calculation is and how they decide that. We'll talk about the transportation operations in a minute. Capital purchase up $12,000. At risk up $47,000, which we were very thankful for. That basically goes all into salaries. And career tech operations and maintenance down $1,600, and I don't know why, considering the Plan 2020 to increase all spending for career tech. I can't answer that. So these funds here, just these alone, total another $367,000 increase that we received from state funds. These are just some major program revenues within the general fund, and as I said, that's that first column on that sheet. The general fund is basically what they say we can have reserve in. That's where they do our general fund analysis and tell us, did we meet our 1 month reserve? And to some systems, this is a huge deal. In Hoover, thank goodness we're fortunate, but they do analyze this. So with our foundation, state and local match, and let me just stop and explain what the local match is. In order to participate in the foundation program, you are required to give money back. Our match for the foundation was $15 million. So again, you have to give a little money back in order to receive those funds. So the total allocation was $77 million, local $58 million, transportation $5 million, ARI, or Alabama Reading Initiative. They actually cut this and came back midsummer and made it whole. They are saying it will be cut significantly for 2018, so we will not have we'll probably have, I'm estimating about $180,000 come 2018. So large cut there. State nurses, $480,000 at risk, $216, and at risk is money that we receive that is based upon those students that are identified as possible dropouts. So that's what we call them, at risk. Again, that money is usually going to salaries. And National Board Certified Teachers, $700,000. We have 140 national board teachers, and we'll get to that, and I want to talk a little bit about that in a moment. These are the different revenues that we receive. This is not, if you try to add this back up, this slide does not add up to what you will see on those previous slides of local. These are, I couldn't fit all those line items on here, but these are just the major program revenues in the general fund local section. So Jefferson County, the 22.1 mills, 20 million. Shelby County, 22 mills, 8.6 million. Hoover City, 24 mills, 38.7. Medicaid reimbursement, 300,000. E-rate, 240,000. Interest, 100. And city council and front door fees at 2.4 million. That is what we have received currently. We are very hopeful that's going to be a little more with those front door fees, but we've the 400,000 is probably what we have received at this point for this current year. So we're hopeful that will be more. So for the proposed general fund, again, this is that first column we're still talking to, and this is just laid out on that report, what monies are spent for these different categories. So for instruction and instructional support, $106 million, operations and maintenance, $18 million, transportation, 5, administrative, 3.3, and then other, 701, for a total of $134 million for budgeted expenditures. And again, let me restate, 82% of this goes to salaries and benefits. And this is just broken down by the different categories. Again, as we should expect in education, instruction would be the largest piece of that pie. Our instructional units, again, we're still talking general fund budget here. We have 857 regular teacher units that are paid through that general fund. That includes some of your local units, special education units of 83.69, and support units 89. Our major budget items, of course, are going to be salary and fringes, and this includes supplements of $115 million, materials and supplies $5 million, purchase services $13 million, and you're going to see purchase services throughout this PowerPoint. Let me just clarify what that is. That's travel and training, contracts, temporary workers, rental equipment. There's a whole another gamut, but those are just some of the typical things that are in purchase services. Operations and maintenance, the total expenditure for this department is $18 million. We have 35 maintenance employees and 97 custodial employees. Salaries and fringes are 6.6, utilities 5.6, maintenance supplies and equipment 2.2. Again, purchase services that we just talked about 3.2, and they have a lot of parts that are in that purchase services, and I don't know why. That's just the way we break it out as accountants and which category it goes in, purchase services instead of supplies, but that's where it's at. Transportation expenditures are budgeted at $5.6 million. We have 1 director. We have 3 secretary clerks, 103 bus drivers. Special education bus drivers and aides are 41, and we have 9 shop mechanics and workers. Let me point out, buses are funded at $6,382. You know that will not buy a school bus. Those are funded only for those buses that are less than 10 years old. I did have that number of how many we had of those, but I can't speak to it at this moment. But we are working on using those fleet renewal funds that we received. We haven't bought buses in 2 to 3 years, so we're looking at buying buses this year. We've already done a bid on some buses, so we're looking to try to get all of our buses refunded in, say, the next 5 to 7 years, so that we'll, again, we're only receiving $6,382 per bus, but we do want to receive those funds for every bus that we have, even, any surplus buses that we need for field trips. Major budget items here are salaries and fringes of $5 million, fuel and oil $348,000, and you may say that can't be. Think of the cost of fuel compared to what it was, a year, 2 years ago. That has significantly gone down, and right now we're getting a very good rate. Parts, supplies, and equipment $213,000. As you can see, everything is going back into salaries and fringes here. Supplements. Athletic supplements are 1.3, budgeted at 1.3. Non-athletic, these also includes local school paid supplements, board paid, temporary or contractual workers, Deferred compensation, that's budgeted of $1 million. National Board teachers, $700,000. We have 140, as I mentioned earlier, and we're very proud of that. I know coming from a system that doesn't actually push National Board so much as it did in years past, this is phenomenal. This is something that Hoover should be so proud of. These are our best teachers. They have been very reflective in their work, thinking about what they've done and how ways that they can improve and change. The board pays the benefits on these supplements. They receive really $5,000 per teacher from the state, and then we pay those fringe benefits on that, just as I call it a reward, because the work that they've put into making themselves an outstanding teacher. General admin expenditures, $3.3 million. Let me just break this down by the major budgeted items. Board of Education Services, $417,000. Executive admin services, $746,000. Business support services, $965,000. System-wide support services, $725,000. A lot of these areas also include, of course they are our salaries and benefits for those people, but they also include a lot of contracts for our software that we use, some of the softwares that we use system-wide, our accounting software, some of the time and attendance software that we use. So a lot of these areas will include those contracts. And let me just say that I've mentioned this to Dr. Murphy, and she mentioned it the other day. Coming from a system that was very small and very poor, the central office staff is very lean. I know they have done well in cutting some and eliminating positions and realigning those duties. But I have been so impressed with the central office, the amount of work that those departments crank out with the few people that they have. And it's just been very impressive to this system, and I think that's something that speaks hugely with this district. The second column, as we mentioned in that PowerPoint or that slide that showed the breakdown, was special revenue funds. Special revenue funds, as I mentioned, are restricted funds. They are federal funds that have specific guidelines and limitations on what we can do with those. These also include local school public funds, and those are also restricted. We've just had meetings with booster clubs to talk about the difference of their non-public money versus public money. Some of you may have even heard them talking about it, but those are the public funds that the principals are responsible for are very restricted. So that's why they're included in this column. And again, special revenue restricted funds. These are just some of the major categories. Title I, we received $1.2 million. Title II, which is teacher and principal training, $141,000. Title III for English language learners, $108,000. IDEA B for special education is $2.3. Preschool Part B, $37,000. Child nutrition, $6.5. The local school public accounts, $3.7. Career Tech Perkins grant, $112, and then the after school program, $1.8, for a total of $16 million for the restricted funds.
Tina, real quick on special revenue.
Yes, sir.
On IDA,
Yes.
that does not include any kind of legal expenses for due diligence or anything like that. It's just straight costs.
Yes, yes, sir. And again, this is just a breakdown showing you their different percentages, and it may be a little hard to see, but this PowerPoint will be on the website later tonight, and you can see those percentages a little better. I'm sorry for the lighting, but it was better in the office. So with that, I wanted to break down those federal expenditures. Some of our biggest programs within those restricted funds are Title I and Special Education, or IDEA-B. So again, as I said, these are restricted. Every dollar of this has to be spent. Otherwise, we can have carryover in Title I. You can have some carryover in Title II. But we are really to zero this out every year. So that's why we budget it down to actual zero, so that there's no money left. There's no equity left in this fund at the end of the year. But again, we are allowed to have some carryover if we do a little better than we anticipated. So salaries and fringes in Title I are at 1.1, purchase services 31, materials and supplies 78. So as you can see, everything goes to people to provide those services for students. Special education, salaries and fringes is 2.2. Purchase services, 111. Materials and supplies, 32,000. Again, you can see everything in our special education goes to providing those services for students through staff to meet their needs. Child nutrition. We do get reimbursements from USDA programs and lunch, 1.7, breakfast 502, commodities 326. The majority of our food service comes from our daily sales that we sell each day through a la carte, lunch, breakfast, and so forth, of $4 million for a total of $6.5 million. Let me just speak to pass-through. That is something that the state did, and I had to look this up because I knew years ago, I mean, it went back. It goes all the way back to 1993. It was a state-mandated raise for CMP staff that goes back. It's this lovely little calculation that we get to, they send us a spreadsheet we get to calculate. So this is what the general fund pays back to CMP. So when you look at, you know, those revenues that are budgeted for general fund, 2.5 million are going back into the CMP program for what we call pass-through or follow-through. You know, you may hear different things, but it's a state mandate that happened in 1993. Again, just a percentage of what the different revenues look like. As we already mentioned, 37% are from our daily sales in the lunchroom. Our expenditures are budgeted at $8.5 million. Our major budget items are labor, 4.4, food, 2.9, supplies, 204, purchase services, 52, indirect cost, 681. And if you've never heard what indirect cost is something that a federal fund can pay back to the general fund for administrative services, use of buildings, facilities, that sort of thing. So, and it is based upon a calculation we apply every year in January, and then they'll give us back a percentage and tell us what that's going to be based upon our application. So what a child nutrition pays back to the general fund is $681,000. So again, we're paying pass-through of 2.5, then they're giving us back. We're basically swapping a little money there, $681,000. And again, just the pie chart of course, labor, as you saw in that previous slide. Everything goes to labor and food when it comes to CMP, as it should. Debt. And we've already talked with Dr. Murphy's financial presentation, what our debt is. So we've looked at it. This is what our payments are going to be for 2017. We have the 2005 capital outlay warrant. Our payment is $482,000 of interest only. That means no principal. Our refunded bonds of 2010, we are paying a little bit of principal, $3.2 million, and interest at 4.7 for 2017. The refunded bonds for 2012, we are paying interest of 2.3. That leaves us a total payment for 2017 of $10,792,000. So what's our total balance look like after we make that payment in 2017? Our balance is going to be $172 million on that debt. As Dr. Murphy had presented before, it was going to be $175. Again, we're making about $3 million towards our principal, so it brings us down to $172. Capital projects. We have, these are the different revenues. State capital outlay 2.8. And just like in the foundation program where we have a local match, we have a local capital outlay match. That means the general fund has to pay a little money back to capital outlay in order to receive capital outlay funds from the state. Ours is 1.4. Fleet renewal is $523,000. Then these are our capital project plans. Again, this is basically what I can continue to call a moving target. As needs change throughout the school year, these are things that we will readjust. But currently, these are some of the things that we're looking at. HVAC, roofs, painting for a total of 2.9. Now, some of the things that we know that and we acknowledge that we need is a Hoover high band room. We can't fit all of our students in there at one time, our band students. We need to look at resurfacing or basically just redoing some of the tracks. And so those are the things that we know that are needed. And so these things that you see here may be readjusted based upon, you know, as those needs come more to light. And that's pretty much it for our budget presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Hancock. 2 months on the job, folks. I think you deserve a round of applause.
I think you warned about the projecting on the side of the wall, didn't you?
I did.
Well, at least there wasn't 1,000 people here as you projected.
We told them this seat over 1,000 people.
There might have been some comments made to Ms. Hancock that there will be 1,000 people here and that they would bring in temporary bleachers to house everybody. But there also might not have been those comments made to Ms. Hancock. But it could have happened. Questions from the board? Comments?
We showed a slight decrease in enrollment, average daily membership, I guess. And we looked at that correspondingly to administration. We have a decrease in administration as well.
We had a decrease of about 46 students, I believe, that we had, but administratively, no, because that's such a spread among our schools that it was fairly inconsequential in terms of that.
Ms. Hancock, I got a question on the expendable trust line item.
Yes.
Am I understanding correctly that this is our PTOs, our booster clubs, our local schools each have?
Well, not our local school money. It's just the PTOs, booster clubs, where we act as a trust agency. We house those funds in our bank accounts for them. Their money flows through our books as recommended by the state. They have to vote and provide a budget for what they want to spend their money on. Again, those dollars do go back into our schools and back into our students, but those boards and those officers, they vote and decide on the budget. Legally, everything that they spend is supposed to be voted on by their board.
Am I understanding this correctly that the fund balance beginning October 1 of 16 is $1.8 million?
Yes, sir.
That sure seems like a lot of money that has been contributed or raised or something for these organizations that I think needs to be asked why that's not being spent on our students.
That would have to be a question for those boards.
You know, based on some things that I had heard and unsolicitedly, that seems like a small amount of money. Is it a requirement for every PTO, every booster organization to let us house their money here?
That is what has been, state still considers that they are recommending we do that. There are still some boards that don't have those funds on their books, but it is recommended by the state. Hoover, I think, from what I can tell, started putting those funds on the books, on our books to disclose that information about the time the state started recommending it. But it is definitely a state recommendation, and when we do our certification meetings and so forth, they basically preach this to us: is get your boosters and your PTOs on your books.
Well, a lot of what you've done here tonight and Dr. Murphy's continued transparency on everything, would it be possible to list every PTO and or booster organization and what their status of their account is? And the reason I say that is because when you get back into these stipends and all these other supplemental things, there's always this cloud of doubt that's out there, and because nobody really knows who gets what and all this, and clearly we've got to pay people to do the things we ask them to do or ask them to volunteer to do beyond the normal work expectation. And if we didn't have it, we couldn't offer the programs and activities that we offer. And as she says, these are the things that make Hoover Hoover.
Right.
But to me, and I don't know if it's problematic, I don't know if it's, I don't know all this, but to me, it would be helpful for everybody to see everything, because and put all this questioning to rest, because it is what it is, and it forces everybody out in the open, to be honest with you.
And actually, for our audit, those, we do receive, their income statements and so forth, and a list of them, their budget as well. But for our audit, that is required that they turn in their bank accounts. I mean, they just turn in, their, usually it's their 930 bank
I
account.
got that, you just said it was recommended, so I would assume that every booster operation, everything that's affiliated under the booster operation, every activity that's
Right.
extracurricular, if you will, is not captured currently. And I don't know that we make that an expectation, but it's, the shining light really helps get people kind of to come clean with what's going on.
Yeah,
Not that
absolutely.
there's anything not clean that's going on, but it's just get all the questions off the table.
Right, right.
Did you mention about discretionary funds?
Yes, and I did fail to mention that. We had talked about that earlier today. Discretionary funds, as many of you may have known, that is money that the board gives to each school to spend at their discretion for different things. And I didn't quite, well, I did go over this on, let me go back to this slide. Sorry if that hurts your eyes. Right here. The state provides, as we already said, student materials, technology money, library enhancement, professional development, and textbook money. So the board does provide a little money going back to the school above what the state sends for those, we call them CIS, or classroom instructional supply money. And this year, Dr. Murphy has talked about this many times, we've looked at it, that we did say we were going to cut those funds. This year, they will receive $25 per student for those discretionary funds above what the state has already received or sent.
And if I might add, that is, that's been calculated in any number of different ways over the course of the last number of years. And so rather than the uncertainty of how that calculation should look, just a straightforward $25 per student above what the state allocates, just to support our schools further in some of the things that they need the discretionary support for. I will say that that's going to be significantly less than our schools have gotten in the past.
And again, that goes back to this conservative budget.
I have a question on transportation. How many buses do we have that run every morning? 124 buses that run an average of how many miles a year total?
This is a test.
Yeah,
I don't have to get you the mileage anymore. The exact mileage.
yeah, that, I wouldn't know that.
My point is 124 buses that drive a long way every day. And we're spending $213,000 for parts and supplies and equipment. Kudos to you guys in
Absolutely.
the transportation department for the way you run that shop over there. That's absolutely amazing. Because everybody has had their tires rotated or oil changed, $45 you to death, don't they? New set of tires cost you $1,000. And here we are, $213,000 for the year for 124 buses. That's awesome.
1,059,480 miles annually.
Million miles, $213,000.
And obviously, we were very conservative as it related to fuel, and should those fuel costs increase, obviously, the impact of that will be real for us. So we're very conservative in hoping that we would see something as we currently are for fuel costs, but that could go up for us.
Oh, when we do sell our buses, we're not required, as the city is, to send it to surplus for auction. I don't believe we can sell outside of that requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
So you guys, I'm sure, are giving us the top dollar for appreciation of the work of government. But
Yeah, I'll speak to this if Jeremy doesn't mind. I'm very proud of him. They offered $3,000 per bus. He negotiated $3,500, and we've already received those funds. So thank you, Jeremy, for that added income.
absolutely.
Building again on this transparency thing, under general administrative expenditures, you're doing a great job of really kind of peeling back the onion on some of this stuff. I know, I was assumed that under general administrative expenditure, the legal expenses would be in there.
Absolutely, they
Would
are.
It would be very helpful to break down for everybody to see, I think, and I don't need to tell you how to do the job. Like Board of Education Services, I don't exactly know what that means.
That Board of
But
Education,
you want to tell me now, I'm just saying.
I can give you a quick breakdown if that's
Well,
okay.
by each category, so don't, that's not necessary, but I'm just thinking, legal expenses as an example, that can be, these days, a fair amount of money. And,
Absolutely.
I don't think it's helpful to go down too deep into it, but it'd be interesting to know how much money is allocated per program. For example, IGPA has a chunk, and I don't know what category rezoning falls in, but that's a chunk. Because, there are questions people raise about legal expenses. Well, I guarantee you, we've got the best legal team going right now.
Absolutely.
And they are very, very fair. And it's a cost of doing business that the people need to understand, because it's a complicated business. So if you could do that without,
Absolutely.
a whole lot of trouble, it'd be really informative.
Yeah, that would be, I can do that. And I'll speak to that kind of Thursday night at our second budget hearing.
I have a question. This may be more of a Dr. Murphy question. If I did my math right, for 2017, we're budgeting $3,026,325 in supplements. That may not be exactly right. I did that on the fly.
Yes, yes.
I understand the need for supplements as having children that have been through the system and one that's there now. I understand how important it is to have the correct personnel with these students outside of normal school hours, and I appreciate that. And frankly, as a parent, demand that. My question is, $3 million. Is there a way that this can be looked at to see if this is not to jeopardize paying teachers and coaches and administration personnel that help with after-school activities, but that's $3 million.
Yes, and we have already started those conversations as it relates to supplements. This year, we will be making a thorough review of all supplements. I've asked all of our principals to identify all individuals on their campus who are receiving supplements, for what purpose are they receiving those supplements, and a justification that supplement is still needed and that work is still needed. Clearly, supplements will be on our radar screen this year. Would anticipate as we come to our budget time next year that that will be a major topic of conversation. Again, not to suggest that there are no needs for supplements. There certainly are. But I believe the accountability piece must be there. We need to know who's doing what, why are they doing it, how much are they making, and can we ensure that that work still needs to be done and that the amount of money they're receiving for that supplement is justified. And we've already started that work.
That's a good approach and good work, and it's interesting what metrics you might use to judge whether or not supplement is what it should be or shouldn't be. As an example, if you use the metric of how many dollars per student per program as an example, that may be one number. But on some other cases, the amount of time spent, if you did how many hours you spent versus the supplement they get or receive, it's probably below minimum wage. So it's really that's a real challenge to be fair to the employees, number one. Certainly make sure the students have got the best they can get from us. And then the budget aspect, it's hard.
Ms. Hancock, would you address the supplements as it relates to the salaries and the fact that the supplements are not going to receive the 2% and 4% pay increase? That's just a salary based.
Yes, this year we did not budget the 2%, 4% raise in with those supplements. As we know, the supplement schedule is based upon percentages, based upon as far as athletics, based upon a bachelor's degree, and then the years of service that person is on. That was based upon really last year's salary schedule because it did not include the 2%, 4% raise. The same with non-athletic supplements. Those are again a percentage. And those are based upon the percentage of the employee's degree and in the years of service that they are on. But again, it did not receive that 4% raise. It was based upon last year's salary.
And the supplement she's making reference to is under your salary schedules tab, and those supplements are very near the back of that document. I think one thing that we'll at least need to give consideration to is the percentage of salary for our supplements versus a set amount of a supplement for a piece of work.
Right.
So it's a little complicated, would be fair to
Yes.
say, that we're paying individuals a percentage of their salary for supplements versus for this work, this is the amount of money you'll receive for that as a supplement. And so that's also a conversation that we're having at this point, is what is fair and reasonable and appropriate for the employee, but also being very thoughtful about the school district's money and being as savvy, as I like to say, as possible with our taxpayers' monies.
Is there any plan to look at income streams that are outside the supplements paid by the school district that relates directly back to being a school employee?
In terms of,
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm gonna set you up. No,
Camps. I left camps.
right.
Because when you start looking at supplements, because you're affiliated with Hoover City Schools, that gives you some promise, some ability to market programs and other activities on behalf of the school district that's not necessarily funneling back through the school, and not necessarily even having to do with in some cases, business to the school. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm saying big picture wise, we gotta be fair to everybody. And, some people have opportunities to access other ways of funding their programs they can just participate in on an extracurricular basis, and some don't.
Yes, and one thing that we have actually just looked at recently that we are receiving some guidance on from the State Department and Ethics Committee, and those camps, it basically just depends on how those funds are collected and how we need to do those. And so there's a lot of different guidelines that we're trying to get guidance on with that. We do know some of those camps do take place. Another thing that we have to look at when we mention those camps are facility use funds. Are we being paid back for those?
And I think
the
we are.
use of our
It's
facilities,
just,
right?
you don't want somebody over here with a small opportunity, or
Right.
somebody with a big opportunity to, feel like they've been shorted. If they need to go to, New York City for a global scholars competition, they can't do it. It's fairness.
Absolutely.
Another question I had real quick, I don't know if Melinda's here, on child nutrition.
Oh, that's.
Well, no, this is pretty.
Okay.
The USDA funds
Yes.
from the feds, is that free and reduced funds, or is that?
That is just reimbursements that we apply for. We actually have to send an application every month to get those reimbursements, and I'll be honest, I don't remember. I've worked on that before, but I don't remember right offhand what that calculation is and how.
Well, no. The reason I was asking it is because in the past, participation in the school lunch program
Absolutely.
is kind of going down, food
Absolutely.
costs are going up. No, there really is no inflation yet, right? But, it's just an interesting thing. It's not a big budgetary item, but I know she does a marvelous job tracking all that stuff and refining it and all that.
Yes, and she
It'd be
has.
interesting to know how many free and reduced lunch children we have, we provide service to, and what the cost of that is.
And that free and reduced number also determines a lot of our other different federal programs as well. I will say this, on behalf of Melinda, she's definitely cut staff this year and not replaced some retirements, some resignations, which has significantly cut her labor hours and her labor cost.
We're very driven by meals per labor hour, and she's been very thoughtful about that. As it relates to the money that we are getting back from the federal government, you get a certain amount of money for every free meal, a lesser amount for reduced, and little to none, but a little dab for those who are full pay.
I guess where I was headed with this whole thing is, out of the entire budget, a lot of that stuff is targeted money that comes from the feds. A smaller piece of it pertains to other students, and when you look at that and have to increase food prices, I mean, it's kind of a big deal.
Yes.
In a smaller way.
Just to respond to your free and reduced lunch, in 2015-16, 24% of our students were on free or reduced lunch.
And
We're
we
still-
thought that that'll probably stay similar to
Pretty
the same.
consistent, yeah.
We're still using targeted catalog, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
We are.
And Dr. Scott, I know, is also with us somewhere. Dr. Scott.
Capital projects, you're showing a proposed ending fund balance of 6.2 million. Does that take into account the 2.9 of the projects plan?
It does. Yes, sir, it does.
So-
There's been a carryover in years past.
So if we do the 2.9 on the capital projects plan, we're still gonna have 6.2 in that account.
Yes, sir.
I gotta ask you, is Arnold still here? I gotta ask this for Arnold. There was a line item in the budget for HVAC software upgrades of $1 million. And we went through this ritual, I don't know how many years ago, about software programs and all this kind of thing.
$860,000.
That may bear some explanation somewhere down the line.
Well, I can speak a little bit to it. We actually had a finance committee meeting on this, and we, Mr. Singer, Mr. Fulton can definitely attest to, we went round and round on this and really hashed it out. Those software upgrades, and basically are for us to monitor, what's happening in our schools as far as, when different temperatures drop, or when, if the air conditioner's been left on in the gym and so forth. I will attest to, I have been part of a energy conservation program that cost the A system, as the one I came from, $14 million, basically to fix HVAC issues. This is worth every dime, because as you will, and I hope, and I know Wes and Trace are doing more work to work on this, and again, with this upgrade, they'll be able to do more to monitor, and that does give us a cost savings in our utilities for sure.
Yeah, I did a little bit of this in a previous lifetime, and yes, Arnold and I have been down this road a little bit on this, and yes, it's one thing to monitor it, but it's another thing to control it. And a person sitting in front of a computer can't monitor all buildings, all issues. It's just a, it'd be interesting to be transparent on that one too. I mean, I'm not that you're not. It's just be interesting to see what we're looking at, because a lot of that stuff, if you get into the human factor and you hire people to go around cutting off lights and all this kind of stuff, which was once proposed, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I've always thought that building accountability is principal system, administrative staff, and you give them the tool to manage your own budget, and on a per student or per square foot basis, there's your metric right there. And see who's doing it, who's not. Even though you have various activities, like you may have after hours activities that are not school related that you rent out facilities. I mean,
Exactly.
It's complicated, but
Yeah,
it's a good thing. You're right.
Is a complicated process, and the way that they are determining to go about this with these upgrades is definitely cheaper than hiring an energy conservation company to come in and do it for you.
That's good though.
Any other questions from the board?
Just thank you.
Ms. Hancock mentioned at the beginning of her talk that there's a questionnaire form that has been passed out that you're welcome to fill out. But we do have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions or comments that we will try to answer. We may not be able to. If not, we will get back to you. Ms. Crane?
Thanks. I have a question. I had to sit up front and make sure. I had a question about the preschool. I know that we get $37,000 from the federal government for the kids with special needs. From what I can recall, looking at financial statements, our preschool costs a lot of local money. And I'd like to see some transparency around that. Like, who goes to preschool? Are those teachers' children? Are they people from the neighborhoods? Do they pay tuition and that sort of thing? I don't think you can answer that tonight.
I cannot, I'm sorry, but
Right.
I will make a note of that.
So you want to know if it's a child care service or it's a legitimate preschool?
No, I mean, I'm hoping it's actual preschool. I'm counting on it being actual preschool since our tax dollars are paying for it.
Well,
But
I
it's
will
more
say
about
this.
how many kids are there. I mean, it was a significant local expenditure last time I looked at it. It was, a lot of money. And I don't know who goes there. And I know $37,000 doesn't even pay a teacher's salary. So I know that we're supporting that program with a lot of local money. The state pre-K, they're the first class pre-K. There's some opportunities for grant money and that kind of thing down the road. I'd just like to see maybe, if you could put some more information about that together.
Could we just be specific so that we can answer your questions?
Yes.
So, in particular, who are the students attending? Not by names,
Oh,
but you're
yeah,
looking
right.
for.
Number.
Right, because
These are
you're supposed
residents
to.
of Hoover. How
Right.
many of those children actually are our children, as in
Right.
employee children? Anything
Right.
else?
No, just the basic costs of it. What does it cost to run the preschool program? Teachers, aides, capital equipment. I know Mr. Chandler's been in front of the board asking for equipment, and there's different answers for whether there's money for that. And those kids getting that foundation, I have a special lean towards special education, so a couple of my questions have to do with that. But getting that right start is very important, and I'd like to know, are we using our local money to support that? What are we, what is that money paying for? Because I've just never known. I've never been able to get any answers on it.
All of those preschool funds that we did receive from federal, all of that actually goes to a salary. It
Of course
doesn't
it
quite
does.
cover that salary
Right.
and benefits.
Right. But I know we have a number of kids in the preschool program, more than one, more than 15, more than 20, I'm guessing. So the second question has to do about supplements. I had a big to-do about getting some payroll records a couple of years ago, and that was me. And I have not ever published what I found. I did share it with Dr. Murphy in great detail in spreadsheet format. And one of the things that I would really like the board maybe to ask some more questions or consider some more questions about is how many supplements each person earns. I found that the male employees were earning lots more. One male employee might earn 3 or 4 supplements by coaching multiple teams. Females didn't seem to have the same opportunities. And I thought that was kind of interesting. There's a debate going on at the national level about that, about males seem to be able to make a head of household living as a teacher by supplementing with these multiple supplements. Women who are also heads of households don't seem to be able to make the same. So I'd love to see maybe some of that incorporated into the transparency. I know you can't answer that tonight. Okay, I'll try to limit it. The legal expenses, I know that outside of IDA and the rezoning, there's also a lawsuit pending against the Board of Education. And I've asked, a couple months ago, I sent in a public records request asking for those invoices or the total costs of it. And it's been, I would guess, a significant expenditure. It's been going on almost 2 years. So I'm hoping that could also be included in the breakdown. So last thing I'll mention is it would be really interesting to know, I know y'all did some adjustments to fees this year paid for by families, or maybe it was last year even. I don't know, I lost track. But it seemed like some of them were lowered, like y'all actually lowered some of the fees that families were having to pay out of pocket to access academy classes, elective classes. There's I did some research a couple of years ago. Across the state, families paid about $40 million in fees for academic classes. That's a lot of money, that to me should be coming from the state to pay for academic classes. So it'd be really interesting to know that. How much are Hoover parents paying, Hoover families? I call those user fees, which I'm not sure user fees in public education are a good mix, but that is what they are for the people who are actually accessing those classes. So
We do have a fee sheet, but I don't have it with me tonight.
Well, I know I'm talking about like an aggregate, like what's that total? Like how much did we collect in fees from, because there's one little revenue code that can be used for that, but I was told by the State Department that, everybody uses that code differently. So it's not necessarily a reliable indicator. One guess as to who said
Let
that.
me tell you that.
One guess. Okay, so I had a lot more, but I'll save them for Thursday. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What are the assumptions, what are the assumptions about the proposed rezoning in this budget?
Actually, since we don't know anything, we didn't, of course, we did budget for legal fees, which is gonna be part of that. But, we don't know, and so this is a proposed budget of what we do know. And, again, like we just mentioned, if gas prices go up, we'll have to adjust, and we do get 2 budget amendments, and we will make adjustments as we see, and plus we also amend in January, once we see once we close the books in October, where we are, what our final ending balance is. So,
Yeah, Janet, good question, and exactly what Tina said. We would give any thought during any amendment opportunities, but probably any significant impact will be in FY 2018's budget. Though much of that will have to be in place to make the transition, which would have to happen with amendments. But you would see probably some other adjustments during the 18 budget.
Any other questions, Mr. Singer?
Going to utility costs and HVAC, et cetera, I did provide several pages of information, my research to Dr. Murphy, which I'm sure is being looked at this point. There are a couple of things. I noticed in taking a look at the aerial photographs of our school roofs are all black, and black, as you know, absorbs heat. We are not in New Jersey, we're in Alabama, we get a lot more heat, a lot more sun. I came across a white roof, and so that's something that's going to be looked at, and as we do roofs, that could contribute to some energy savings. Also, I brought up about the Internet of Things, if you will, smart HVAC systems, where the HVAC unit doesn't have to be in all of them, provides information feedback so that it could be representative of several other HVAC units for that building.
Councilman Smith?
I recall a few years back that it was explained that, and I think it's out of the local funds, that you have to give a certain percentage back to the state to help fund the less fortunate systems within the state.
not necessarily for less fortunate, but if you actually, this slide shows it right here. In order to participate in the foundation program, you have to give a 10 meals back of your local fund. Our amount this year is 15.3 million. It's what you don't necessarily give it back. We get to keep it and we get to spend it. But again, in order to receive the money from the foundation program, we have to provide $15 million of that.
Would you get that back?
And every school district has to do a 10 mil.
Yeah, every school district has.
Or an otherwise.
My understanding, because with ADM, you contribute, you have to have a district. So when you contribute the 10 mills, based on ADM and other claims, then you could conceivably get that and more back, because they're averaging 9,000 or so. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Because what we actually receive from the foundation, we contribute the 15 million, which totals, ends up being part of that 67. So it's 60, sorry, let me get there.
But you don't actually send it to the state.
Right, you don't send it, that's,
You promise it for yourself. It's not like you put it in a big kitty and it gets redistributed.
How do the other systems get to make use of that then if they don't?
they don't, because we really don't send it to the state.
Right.
back, we get to keep it and we get to spend it in our foundation program, but in order to get the money from the foundation program, you know, we have to contribute our 10 mills, and our 10 mills is 15 million. But again, we keep all that. You know, we don't actually send them a check and we're swapping money. We do get to keep that, and it is spent on our foundational units, our teachers, and, you know, as we talked about throughout the budget. But we have to provide that in order to receive any money from the foundation program. And as Dr. Murphy stated, every school system that participates in the foundation program has to do the same thing. They contribute 10 meals.
I think I know where your question is coming from, and there's been discussions about income-based funding in Montgomery. So I would watch out for that. If there's only one way to contribute to the systems, you know, we're obviously here to take care of Hoover schools here, and that's our obligation. But beware of Montgomery.
Any other questions? Again, Phil, yes, sir.
I guess it's a general question about the state funding. When you were talking about the state funding, you said they several times. Who sets the criteria for all those lines in the state budget?
For the most part, the state legislature does that.
Okay.
And then,
When you say for the most part, is that?
well, you know, they decide on an amount. Then, you know, the state Department of Education, they have all these lovely formulas that I cannot speak to of how they decide who gets what and which portion is, you know, divided out. But, you know, when the state legislature approves that budget, that's where those funds come from.
And that they specify it for each school district in the state?
The State Department of Education does that. But as a total budget, the legislature has to approve that.
But do they do it line by line, like you showed here in these slides? So there is a criteria for each of those?
Absolutely, yes.
Would like to mention Dr. Hedwin is one. You are one of the original board members in the city in Hoover School. Thank you for being here.
I remember these times.
Any other questions?
May I just make one last point? I don't think that you should break out into any sort of thunderous applause of the fact that we have a $1.8 million spend more than we bring in. But I can tell you that there has been significant work and diligent effort made to bring this from last year's budget summary, which was $10,445,040.22 to be exact. So again, I just want our public to understand that we have been thoughtful, careful, we're reining it in, we're being savvy with your money, we're being respectful of where we are, and I hope in great measure that is evident to you from a 10.4 million spend more than you're bringing in to a 1.8.
And I'm okay with a thunderous applause for that. Mr. Schultz.
I'd like to follow up on that. If I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of talk over the last few months about adequate school funding. We have a new council coming in. That amount that you just stated could be impacted by, we're making an assumption that the funding that is going to be supplied by the city is the same as in the past. Is that correct?
That is the assumption.
So that, what we heard over the last 3 months could significantly impact that figure you just gave. Is that correct?
Yes. So the assumption is that we would receive the $2 million from our city plus the $1,500 front door fee for each residential home that's built.
And what we've heard over the last 3 months would raise that amount quite a bit, hopefully.
Heard from who?
From the people that were running.
Did you say that?
I didn't win.
Derek said it? Derek.
Several people that did win made that statement.
No, but here's the other thing that bothers me about that very point, and that is this front door fee, $1,500 is a noble thing, one time. If you've got this child comes into kindergarten, he graduates 12 years later, then, you know, if you're not covering the adequate expense for that child during the whole duration, you have gone upside down in a big way over a 12-year period because you only got $1,500 on the front end. And so it's great right now, it's a warm and fuzzy, but the building slows down, you don't get that. That's a revenue source that is just gone.
Robin, I think to answer your question, this budget is based on what we are currently receiving from the city. It does not take into account what may or may not come later. And so, yes, that number could change one way or the other if that number went up or down. Much as the same way, this budget does not show the sale of Old Berry High School, because although it has been approved and it's going through, we don't have that yet, so that is not shown in this budget as well.
You also have the Jefferson County 1% tax that was, I say, taken away from us by our local delegation in the legislature before last. It was held up by Judge Graffio. Court orders on the state Supreme Court legislature put on the ballot for November a referendum that would make 600 different laws in effect taken off the court order. So that could affect us up to 1.75 million. We'd basically kill the goose and get 1.75 million instead of 20 million a year. And I'll tell you right now, at least one board member is considering filing suit or an amicus brief if there's a ruling. That money should stay in capital projects or capital debt within Jefferson County. It's a Jefferson County 1%. It's not included Shelby County. So that's something to look at. That's pie in the sky maybe, but it could be 1.75 released. It'll be done in arrears, so you probably will not see it in the upcoming fiscal year.
Explain the 1 point plus versus the 20 million. I think that's where the clarity gets.
Repurpose it.
We have council members here. I'm going to matter, Mr. Reeves. You can explain what 1% sales tax means to Jeffco. I believe it's 17 million. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you consider the entire city, it's 20.
So now you're 20.
So about 17 million. The 80 correct figure we got in 2007. How much? $87 million we were advanced because bonds were sold. That's because Mayor Lankford at the time and the commission passed 1% sales tax in Jefferson County. We got 80-something million. That's the cash reserve, probably not the right term. Most people are referring to this dwindling down because of net operating or net loss per year. They could rebonded that again, and that money could have been put back into capital projects like it was intended. Our local delegation, as much as I think of them, in my opinion, we have neighboring communities such as Mount Brook, Homewood, and Vestavia. I'm not speaking for them. They don't have the retail tax base that we have in this city. They wanted to go in and they wanted to kill the goose because Jefferson County basically, for us, said we'll give you 1.75 million out of 17 million, we'll give Hoover 1.75, and the rest of it we're going to buy buses, we're going to help the zoo, and I'll be quiet before I say.
Well, a further point of discussion on this, or clarification, as I understand it, and that is, once this existing 1 cent sales taxes in Jefferson County goes away, which is scheduled to go away, what, 6-7 years now?
If it had continued on the payback period,
I
6
think
to
they
7 years.
extended
Okay.
it another 30 years.
Then all of a sudden, you got local sales tax dropped at 1 penny. So we can keep the sales tax where it is and pick up $20 million a year for the city of Hoover, and yet we're gonna get what?
We're going to get 1.75 million. I'd have to have calculated to get exactly, but and some people will say in Montgomery, and I agree with most of how they stand, their argument back to me was, well, Hoover can just pass a 1% sales tax. I don't know what we can pass, but we are a retail-based community. So I'm not taking a stand on what we have to do, but we have to be very careful about taxing ourselves out of the retail market. Any extra questions?
Here again, to recap, the city of Hoover and Jefferson County portion of the city of Hoover will collect almost $20 million from that 1 cent sales tax that goes to Jefferson County, of which Jefferson County turns around and writes the schools $1,750,000.
Is that one time or when?
That's per annum, and it's arrears again, so it's postponed. They gave, Mr. President and I sat in a meeting to listen with the county attorney and the county manager. He turned redder than he is right now before that meeting was over.
That meeting did not end very well, by the way.
So,
Right. The term is they're repurposing the money. and that some of them will go to the zoo. They were going to give some money to transportation.
Economic development.
But that's being held up in court temporarily. But the legislature, they want to pass the amendment that will allow the county, these other counties also, to basically repurpose this money.
Judge Graffiel held it up because he said there wasn't a caucus or a quorum for them to pass up to 600 local bills that were passed. So this is basically a type of local rule that we may sanction in November on the ballot as a referendum. It's one of the few things that came out of Montgomery in the special session that's still going on today. Now, I'm not saying you can fight a battle and say we're going to fight over the 1% and destroy 600 bills. That's not going to happen. But there's possibly a way to file an amicus brief or simply file suit.
Well, some municipalities also were hoping that that would sunset the county, the Langford penny, and then the municipalities would then add their own penny sales tax to fund city services, including schools.
Exactly. Stay where you were without overall raising the tax.
The rate would not go up. It's 9% now. It would stay 9%, except Hoover would now add an extra penny as the Larry Langford tax went away.
And as many friends we have in the press, this is the one thing that did not get covered. I don't understand. This is $1 billion lifespan bond here, and just like nobody said anything, it's Hoover has to look out for Hoover. Mount Brook, Homewood, Vestavia, great neighbors. They don't have the tax base we do in retail, so that may be something we can still revisit. But sorry, Ms. Hancock, got off track there.
Can I ask one last question? Because something that I didn't hear talked about tonight was, you know, there were some cuts back in the spring that got some folks kind of upset, theater and some stuff like that. Would you say, that, Dr. Murphy, that the budget that you're recommending for approval to the board, has it negative? Are our kids suffering a negative academic impact? Based, you know, I mean, are they worse off this year academically than they were last year? Have you had to make some cuts that made you uncomfortable?
No, I think what's happened is that we've had people who've just stepped up big time to pick up lots of duties and responsibilities, and my concern about that is, can we load down the little wagons too much? So would I say to you that we have a less quality opportunity for our children? Absolutely, that is not true. But do I have some serious and significant concerns that we can keep adding tasks onto certain people to pull the load? I'm very fearful about that. This is a very conservative budget, and I will say, unless something happens, that something being additional revenue, that there will be serious cuts that I pray to God do not negatively impact the quality of our education. But if the expectation is to balance a budget, that will necessitate looking at personnel. As we've already shared, 82% of the budget being personnel. When you begin to decrease personnel, those are programs, those are opportunities, those are electives that those people are bringing to the table with us. And when we lose them, we lose those programs, those electives, and those opportunities.
Yes, sir. And when we talk about this budget, we're only talking about opportunities we have here currently. We're not talking about the ability to do vocational programs. The school district doesn't have any funding for that. So we're meeting the needs of a certain group of students that are tracking to college, but it's a large group of kids that are not going to college. So again, thank y'all for all the hard work y'all have done to reduce the budget to this point. But again, we're talking about more opportunity that the school system actually need long term for our kids.
You've got an opportunity to impact that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Well, certainly as we want to look at additional opportunities and electives and not only career, vocational opportunities, magnet, fine arts, whatever, those are going to require some additional resources. So yes, very conservative. Is it negatively impacting us right now? No. if we're wanting to look at expanding opportunities for our children, whether that's through vocational, fine arts, or otherwise, we will not do it on the budget we currently have and the revenue that we currently are receiving.
Again, Ms. Hancock, thank you for your presentation and to your staff for working hard and getting this together.
Do you mind acknowledging the people in your department and Steve and some others back there who've just been tremendous?
I have to give them kudos. They take very, very good care of me. I could not have done this budget in 2 months without them taking the biggest load off of, as I told Dr. Murphy, where I came from, it was just me. So this has been like birthday cake, having such a capable and competent staff. But I want to definitely recognize Michelle McKay, our Director of Finance. Teresa Meadows is our local school liaison. Lee Alford is the after-school program. Steve Marshall is our payroll director. He does a fabulous job. He has working with him Sharon McCall, Liz Rhea, and Leslie Polk. So thank you all so much, and I do tell them every day how blessed I am to have them.
Thank you again. Our next budget hearing will be same presentation, same format, Thursday night, 6:30 at Central Office. That presentation will be live streamed, so it will be available to watch if you're not able to attend. Again, thank you to our City Council for allowing us to use the chamber tonight. We are adjourned.